Tonight, an independent city councilman refuses to explain himself after 41 Action News discovered he spent taxpayer dollars on expensive trips.
41 Action News investigator Jessica McMaster dug deeper and shows us the paper trail.
I am done.
I have one more question.
No, you don't.
Aside from we keep showing up. Hi, Tom. Jessica with 41. I have a quick question for you. But independent city council member Tom Van Camp keeps walking away. We have a question about a trip that you took. Here's why. In May, we began looking through the city's financial records after a tip came in about a different story. When looking into that matter, something else caught our attention. Expense report after expense report, 3 years, 10 trips, more than $20,000 spent on travel by Van Camp.
These folks have to know that they live in the fishbowl and everything they do is going to be subject to, public opinion and sunshine requests.
Independent city manager Zach Walker says council members are allowed to travel at their own discretion when it comes to city business.
So that's really the term that we keep driving home is what's a business purpose.
But we found at least 3 of Van Camp's trips are not all business. A December expense report shows Van Camp attended a power conference in Las Vegas. We looked into the conference and found it was a 3-day event. So why did Van Camp stay 6 nights on the city's dime? He did the same thing the year before, the same conference, this time in Orlando, a 4-day event. But Van Camp's hotel receipt shows he stayed 7 nights in an upgraded executive king room. We made multiple requests to meet with the councilman about his travels, each one denied. So we caught up with him at a ribbon cutting ceremony for the city's solar farm.
Isn't this all part of it?
You have to explain that to me. What were you able to bring back from those that helped?
Oh, it always helps. Everything you go there, you learn something new every time.
A vague response about what he gained from going to the conferences. And so it was worth about $20,000 on taxpayer money. City spokesperson Meg Lewis cut us off from talking with the councilman. He walks away clearly frustrated about our questions. But we didn't even get to ask Van Camp why his travels often include valet parking, rental cars, and early bird check-in at the airport. And there's still one more trip we have questions about. In 2015, Van Camp put in a request to visit a power plant in McIntosh, Alabama. But we're trying to figure out how he got there, since he stayed more than 3 hours away in Panama City Beach. A 213-mile commute to McIntosh. Van Camp's rental car only had 125 miles on it. So here we are again, trying to get answers. Why did you stay in Panama City Beach 3.5 hours away? Van Camp did reimburse the city for 3 of his 7-night stay, but he still won't say what he did with the rest of his time at the beach. Expense reports are signed off on by 3 different departments, including the city manager's office. But what's the point? The city manager tells us while personal expenditures are not allowed, it's left up to each individual council member to decide what's appropriate or not. That at the end of the day, elected officials are held accountable by the voters. I'm investigator Jessica McMaster, 41 Action News.
In a 41 Action News exclusive, it's one of the most expensive contracts ever awarded to a company by city leaders and independents.
But now in a story with so many twists and turns, 41 Action News investigator Jessica McMaster explains why some city leaders wonder if the costly contract was an orchestrated deal.
I don't doubt for a minute there's something going on.
A nearly $10 million contract awarded to the high bidder.
It raises questions in my mind.
A 5-month-long 41 Action News investigation now has independent city leaders wondering.
Was this scripted before we hit the gavel and said the meeting's open?
Last year, the Independent City Council hired Environmental Operations, Inc., a St. Louis-based company, to decommission the city's old power plant.
We could have left it there for
years.
For years, yeah.
Located in a desolate area of Missouri City, the power plant deemed safe by the EPA didn't need to come down. Still, majority of the council wanted it gone. But why did they opt out of negotiating with another company that records show bid out the project for half the price of Environmental Operations?
We're talking about $5 million.
Outvoted, council members Karen DeLucy and Scott Robertson tried to put a stop to the decision, but they're not the only ones who question why the city chose the high bidder.
We could not find the basis for making that decision.
Garland Land serves on the Public Utilities Advisory Board. The group provides guidance to the members of the City Council when it comes to making decisions involving the city-owned utility, Independence Power and Light.
We have felt that we have been ignored by the City Council oftentimes.
The board advised the City Council to postpone the project, spend nothing, since there wasn't an urgent need to take down the plant.
They then, at their next meeting, went ahead and ordered the contract.
And did so without properly evaluating the bids.
There was no ranking of the bids.
Instead, majority of the City Council directed staff to strictly negotiate with the high bidder.
If I could reverse time, we didn't do that process as thoroughly as we might have.
Independence Mayor Eileen Weir is one of the 5 board members who voted in favor of environmental operations. While she admits the process wasn't typical, she stands by her vote, saying the low bid was too low.
Given the complexity of the project, I did not feel confident that the project could be completed for the lowest price that was presented to us.
We know the high bidder is the only company the city negotiated with, that the process was rushed and incomplete. But when digging beneath the surface, we found even more things that are raising questions. This 2016 agenda shows environmental operations received an exclusive invite to give a presentation to the City Council about Missouri City, 1 year before the company got the contract.
Yeah, it was, it was a little bit out of the ordinary.
We obtained a copy of environmental operations presentation. The company lists the issues at the power plant and lays out its plans for tackling them, indicating the company already visited the site.
There could have been some conflict of interest because of the existing relationship. So that is not good.
At the time, Deputy Director for Power and Light, Andy Boatwright, sat in on that meeting. He didn't want to go on camera, but sent us an email saying inviting environmental operations to speak directly to City Council was appalling and bad form. Boatwright says it violates the city's procurement policy and, at a minimum, leaves the impression environmental operations was being given preference over any other vendor.
I don't know who brought them in or why they were given that opportunity to present to the council.
Why would they be the only group who was invited to City Hall?
Well, I think they were invited by a couple city council members.
Who?
Well, I believe it was council member Doherty and Van Camp.
Typically, it's indicated on the agenda who adds what, but in this case, it's not documented. We reached out to Councilman Tom Van Camp, who was at the center of a different 41 Action News investigation that exposed he spent thousands of dollars on trips to the beach that don't appear to be related to city business.
I am done.
I have one more question.
No, you don't.
Van Camp wouldn't talk to us then. He didn't respond to our request for an interview about Missouri City.
I didn't bring anybody.
Councilman Kurt Doherty also declined our request for an interview, but we were able to catch up with him at City Hall to see if we could figure out who invited the group and why.
Did you invite them to the study in 2016?
Somebody might have.
Somebody might have.
But Doherty denies inviting environmental operations. But this receipt with Doherty's name on it raises some more questions. Within the same time period of that 2016 study session, council members Doherty, Van Camp, and John Perkins dined out with John Carnes. The topic of discussion, Missouri City Power Plant. Carnes is a local attorney who spent time in prison for bribing a council member to vote in favor of a project that would benefit Carnes' client.
I honestly don't know why they would be meeting with him about Missouri City.
He represented some guy who wanted to finance it.
That's ludicrous.
So you're saying that's a bogus claim?
Oh, I don't believe it for a minute.
DeLucy and Roberson say they had no idea about the meeting, that council members aren't involved with city financing.
We don't do that. We have people on staff in the finance department who have established relationships with reputable lenders where we get bonding.
We reached out to the city manager who tells us financing Missouri City was never considered.
I think he was wanting to finance that. We were going to finance it, yeah, but we decided to finance it ourselves.
We reached out to John Carnes. He tells us the same thing, that he met with the city council members to discuss financing the project. We also reached out to environmental operations to find out who invited the company to that 2016 study session, but our calls were not returned. I'm investigator Jessica McMaster, 41 Action News.
He is a local attorney who spent time in prison for bribing a city councilman.
So why are city leaders and independents meeting with John Carnes behind closed doors?
41 Action News investigator Jessica McMaster pulled city contracts to get answers.
He's known around Independence for having close ties to City Hall.
I do have suspicions.
John Carnes is a former Independent city councilman who several years ago went to prison for bribing another member of the city council. And now 41 Action News investigators have learned city leaders are holding backdoor meetings with Carnes on controversial projects that involve millions of dollars. Last year, the City Council awarded a contract to Environmental Operations, Inc. to buy, demolish, and remediate the city's old power plant, one of the most expensive contracts ever issued to a single company in the city's history.
I bring it up constantly. That was such a bad decision.
Environmental Operations, one of two companies deemed qualified for the job, bid the project just under $9 million, but that's twice as much as the low bidder.
We're talking about $5 million.
For reasons unknown to council members Karen DeLucy and Scott Robertson, their fellow council members directed staff to strictly negotiate with the high bidder in what they call a rush decision on a project that didn't need to happen in the first place.
EPA was not requiring us to do anything. And so my position was, why spend $10 million?
In 2016, 1 year before the city council hired Environmental Operations, this old agenda shows the company was invited to City Hall to give a presentation on the Missouri City project. Mayor Eileen Weir admits the invite was out of the ordinary.
I don't know who brought them in or why they were given that opportunity to present to the council.
3 weeks after the presentation, we came across a receipt that shows council members Kurt Doherty, Tom Van Camp, and John Perkins met with John Carnes to discuss Missouri City. Doherty submitted the receipt. He tells us Carnes was going to help the city finance the project.
He represented some guy who wanted to finance it.
That's ludicrous.
So you're saying that's a bogus claim?
Oh, I don't believe it for a minute.
We looked into Doherty's claims. City manager Zach Walker tells us the city planned to use funds from Independence Power and Light, the city-owned utility, and that outside financing was never considered. But 2 days after Doherty met with Carnes, a different receipt shows Doherty also dined out with a guy named Joe Campbell about the project.
I think he was wanting to finance that.
Both Carnes and Campbell previously backed up Doherty's claim that the meetings were about financing.
Assume that's true. Why are we meeting with Joe Campbell to finance Missouri City as a project? We don't do that. We have people on staff in the finance department who have established relationships with reputable lenders.
But it's not the first time Campbell's name came across our desk. In August, the 41 Action News investigators first told you about the controversy surrounding the sale of the old Rockwood Golf Course. Citing fears of the land being developed into Section 8 housing, the city council rushed to purchase the property, but what they did with it ticked off the people who live here.
Why would you take a pristine piece of property in the middle of the city and turn it into a solar farm?
You have to react to what's happening, and we had some push to get this done of a negative manner.
Councilman Van Camp led the way on the Rockwood purchase. Longtime owner of the land, Ron Brew, tells us Van Camp contacted him nearly 2 years ago about the city's potential interest in buying the land.
Wanted to know what the sale price was.
But when Brew met with Van Camp in person, someone else was there.
It was Tom Van Camp, a city council member, and John Carnes.
No one around City Hall can confirm they had any knowledge Carnes was involved in discussions about Rockwood, including the mayor.
I wasn't aware of any of those meetings or discussions.
But there's another element to this. The city didn't buy from Brew. Several months after Brew met with Carnes, someone else came into the picture.
I got a call from from Joe Campbell.
Records show Campbell bought the golf course from Brew for $550,000. Campbell then took his plans to the city to put in Section 8 housing. So 2 months later, the city paid Campbell $985,000 for the property, a $435,000 profit.
I don't doubt for a minute there's something going on.
In 2013, the city entered into a contract to purchase the old Medical Center of Independence, now home to IPL. Records show Carnes represented the seller, who the city agreed to purchase the property from for $1.5 million. But at some point, and for reasons unknown, Campbell came in and completed the deal for $2 million.
Why do they keep popping up in these more controversial dealings with the city?
I don't know. I really don't know. They're high dollar items. They all deal with IPL.
Joe Campbell didn't want to speak with us about this story. John Carnes tells us he'd rather stand out in a snowdrift than speak with us, though he did issue this statement that in part reads, "The negative comments of my critics are fiction and fantasy." He goes on to say that vendettas, feuds, and grudges are recreational activities in Independence. Outside City Hall tonight, I'm Jessica McMaster, 41 Action News.